Hey everybody, Jeff Tidwell here with another one of my tweet videos for you today. It is Saturday, January 18th, 2020, and as always we are going back into the past, this time all the way back to April 2019 to look at some tweets, analyze them, break them down, discuss them, however you'd like to frame that. Of course, as always, I can be found on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Telegram, Instagram, and Parler. If you're not watching this video on BitChute, you're watching it on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe. Hit the little bell for notifications and leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations, accolades and criticisms. I take them all, and I do appreciate that. And of course, as I always say, if you're listening and you find my cadence to be a little bit on the slow side, you can hit the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half of the time. Time is the currency, of course, and that is double bang for your buck. And today, without further ado, I do welcome you. Thank you once again for watching, and I hope you enjoy today's content. So, we'll start today with a Twitter story. Earlier this week, I did go ahead and solicit Twitter, my followers and others, for stories of censorship and things that are going on social media that may be interesting, and I requested that people DM me their stories so we can talk about them and give me some topics for today's tweet video. And my friend Florian was kind enough to send me something that we could use today. So, hey Florian, hope you're out there watching. Thank you very much. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you provided for us. So Florian, my good friend, he slid right into my DMs and he said, hello. I said, hey. He says, good day. How are you? I return the favor. I say, not bad, not bad. Yourself? He says, I'm great, thank you. It's nice connecting with you. Well, thank you for replying to my solicitation on Twitter, Florian. And I say, of course, likewise. He says, where are you from? I'm in Boston. So I say, Boston, you? And I won't dox his location, but he is in a warmer climate. So I say, probably warmer than here. Ha! He then says, yeah, it is. What do you do for work? I respond, financial advisor. He says, good. And I return, yeah, man. So then Florian says, let me introduce myself properly. I'm a crypto pundit and also a senior account manager with deep expertise in Forex and binary options trade. If you have interest in making extra money, of course, me being in this context a financial advisor, he says, I'd like you to join our program and start making money from Forex and cryptocurrency investments. And I say, not interested. Thank you. And he says, okay. So thank you very much, Florian, my good friend, for giving us something to work with here on the broadcast. We're always looking to share Twitter stories and various points of interest that, may bring people in and help us all feel a little more connected. It has been great connecting with you. So without further ado, let's talk about some tweets from April 2019. So we're going to start today with a tweet about post-truth. We are not technically in a strictly relativistic post-truth world. We are effectively in a post-truth world, effectively, due to the increased relativity of truth. That is to say, there is objective reality. But human beings have difficulty agreeing on what it is. And it's getting harder. So, of course, we do not live in a strictly post-truth world. We have an outer reality that reflects the laws of physics, among other considerations. We have that outer world we all see, we all share, the one that we have, empirical evidence for, that we can relatively, more objectively view as a group, as a large group known as humankind, looking at it through our very specific filter, our window on the world that comes through our human perception, which is different from the perception of other living creatures that we all share this world with, the animal kingdom, as it were. But of course, we do also have our inner world interpretation of events, a more subjective reality filtered through our cognitive processes and how we, as individuals, 7 billion of us or more, as there are, we all view the world differently. We have different frames and truths of our own. And of course, part of the scientific process, the scientific method, and what you see in terms of debate online, people coming together from different sides, bringing one opinion here to another, and finding the truth that lies between each side of any given binary. Now, the world is not all binaries, of course, either. But in the context of this tweet, we're talking about post-truth. Now, when we hear the word post-truth world, some people say, well, we do have, actual physical events that have happened, flesh and blood, life and death. We have all kinds of things that happen geologically and all this, you can't say that it's all post-truth, it's not really happening. And that's not what I'm saying, because it is objectively there. Truth is not ultimately, in many ways, subjective, but in many ways it is. As always, context counts. So, while we are not strictly in a post-truth world, there are a number of areas of human interaction and linguistics and so forth in which, well, it is a bit of a post-truth environment. Politics, for example, I often call politics a post-truth realm. Politics is a post-truth realm. Check out that video on my channel on BitChute and YouTube for more information on that. But that's because politics is a world of largely framing. Framing, filters, and selectivity in how we assess different situations, how we look at different environments. Now, human beings, we don't have the same outlook that animals do. Animals live in a moral world. If one animal harms another animal, you can see the effects of that immediately. They reflect in the reality of the situation. With humans, we have another layer. It's called ethics, a moral code to live by. We look at things more complicated, in a more complicated frame than just, harm, just survival, harm. I'm not saying that animals can't love and hate, they can't express, they can certainly express the appearance of love and hate. They can have a camaraderie with other animals of the same species or other, and they can also enact aggression towards those other animals, which would be a form of hate. So they do have a moral system, but they are not cognizant of it for the most part. We can't mind read humans, just as we can't mind read animals, and so on and so forth. But they're not looking at it in an ethical filter. There's no postmodern filter or moral code or religion or system of ethics that animals follow. So animals have their world. We have morality. We have a wider lens on what's going on. But we still don't have neutrality. We have in-group preference. Now, I call myself a bit of a humanist, and people tend to get a little perturbed by that because there is such thing as secular humanism. When I say humanism, I'm talking about humans first, animals and all other considerations second. Now, with that frame in mind, my considerations for what is moral and what is good is subjective. to me. Now, we all have our own sense of morality. We have our own sense of truth. And when we're trying to understand our environment, we might look at it in different frames, different windows, different filters and colors that help us to label things, to have more accurate, more refined pattern recognition, and so that we can easily put two and two together on any given equation, whatever moral question it may be. Is this better? Is this better? Is this better for the greater good? Or is this better for the greater good? All these questions, we have the, I guess you could call it, privilege of asking, and animals can't. But that's a bit tangential. We are effectively in a post-truth world due to the increased relativity of truth. Because truth changes depending on which media you take in, which sources of information assign our opinions, and so forth. We are looking at a limited window on reality itself, the bigger picture, the macro and the meta. We are looking at just from our set of eyes, from peering out from our inner world, our inner reality, we are filtering what's happening. And we do our best to try to find the greater truth, what's really going on, and the best way to describe it to others and to interpret it. But ultimately, we all do need to keep the conversation going. That's why I'm pro-information and pro-free speech. I like to make sure we can all keep talking, comparing and contrasting our different views so that we better understand the world on a greater level. But post-truth, of course, is, people might call it lying. But lying, of course, is it intentional? Gaslighting has to have intention behind it. Are you trying to craft a reality for everybody and mislead them? Is this disinformation or misinformation? Like, there's all this question of intent with post-truth and environments of post-truth. Intent is often, of course, about achieving some goal, survivalistic in some respect, self-serving in some respect. And in other cases, you do have people that are showing out-group preference, and like a lion hugging a bear, you're showing out-group preference and giving love to someone else. But post-truth, in the context of politics, you have people that say a lot of things. They make promises, and whether they can keep them or not, they're saying them. There may be truth to what they're saying. They may believe in what they're saying, but is it likely to happen? If I make a promise that I'm going to deliver 10 of something, and I only deliver 8, am I lying if I were unable to deliver 10 and only 8? No, I might have been a little hyperbolic. And if you frame hyperbolic statements or hyperbole as lying, of course, in a post-truth realm, lying, hyperbole, pointing these things out is a little bit redundant because everybody is assumed to be doing them on some level. We are all using postmodern, post-truth frames to push our persuasion. The art and science of persuasion often doesn't look at the nuts and bolts, as I call them. It's not looking at the facts. It's looking at the appearance, at the optics. Because in this world where we have such short attention spans, we only have, 5 or 10 minutes here and there to spend our time watch. Check out my new tweet, time watching, for more about that. But we have only so much eyeball time on our screens and in our environments. We have only so much media we can take in, may it be social or independent media, or mainstream, mollusk media, whatever media it might be that we're taking in, the information we're seeing, the people we're interacting with. We only have so much time. So sometimes people will just look at a headline or a lead of an article, the first couple of paragraphs of a news article. They'll need to read your tweet or read whatever you're typing or writing. Really, they need to have it very easily digestible. Otherwise, it's eating up time that they could be spending on, the other 100, 200, 300, or 400 or more people or sources of information that are vying for their time watch, their attention, their interest. So we are effectively in a post-truth world due to the increased relativity of truth. Truth is in many ways largely subjective and relative, just as morality is. We all have our own view on what is good, what is right, and what is wrong. I don't believe in right think or wrong think. That's usually a product of a very persuasive ideology. But I do believe that we all do have our own sense of what's better or not so good on various topics and vectors. So we have objective reality, but human beings have difficulty agreeing on what it is, and it's getting harder. It is getting harder. We have a lot of white noise out there in the world, different voices that are, in many ways, some of them are more truthy, as the late Stephen Colbert would say, than others. There is misinformation out there. There is disinformation. But of course, who is the arbiter of what is dis, and good information? And that is a great question, because we do have scientists. I know scientists are human beings. They have tribal tendencies, and science is the belief in the ignorance of the experts. But I also do say seek subject matter experts on many topics. But scientists disagree. Consensus isn't necessarily real in science, because there's always another person pushing forward, pressing the scientific method forward and saying, well, we have two really good conclusions here, but the truth lies between. No one's lying here. It's not a post-truth environment per se, but when people are trying to persuade and they're looking at people that don't have the same level of knowledge on the subject, it does become about theater. So in many ways, our world, the larger waves, some people might frame social movements and cultural engineering and persuasion as different waves crashing against each other and crashing on different shores. But human beings, we have difficulty agreeing on what the truth is. And that's a good thing. That means the ball keeps on moving forward. Keeps moving forward, and scientists, which is all of us, we are all on some level, if we're thinking about these things and looking for solutions to problems in our lives or others, we are scientists. We are social scientists. We may be chemical scientists, however it may be. But if we think with the scientific method, we are scientists. And maybe our purview is our jurisdiction in the world of science is only our own lives. But if we think and we start to get analytical and poke around and try to find the problems and look for solutions, I think this is a healthy mindset for us all to enjoy and for us to get from point A to point B. So post-truth, you see it in any place where there's a large institution, where there's people that are part of a movement. There may be elements of, hey, a little bit of hyperbole here, some questionable framing there, but in the whole, we do not live in a post-truth world. Get grounded, as I say, get grounded, understand, nobody is implying that you're living in a simulation. That is an ideology, a theory, an axiom, for example. There are all kinds of axioms, some of them I call modern religions, that help bring order and purpose and guide our reality. But largely, while we have our inner world, our inner filter that goes up against and gets tested against the outer world filter that is what everybody sees, the general consensus reality, while we have it, it doesn't necessarily mean that, well, just because I say something makes it true. But then again, someone could make the argument, well, you get into philosophy, you get into why there is this axiomatic thinking, like simulation theory, and religion at large. Why are we here? Those big questions. Why do I think this way? What am I? what is my consciousness? Like, we as humans, we have the blessing and the curse of consciousness to give us these questions and to make sure we're always thinking, we're always moving forward and questioning everything. And I think that's a beautiful thing about it. But I do want to get away from the idea that post-truth means that it's all clown world, it's postmodern, and nothing is true, and nothing really exists. It's all just a construct. That is not it. But context counts, and in certain areas, especially of linguistics and human interactions, on a grand scale, optics matter. And communication style and attention span matters, and so sometimes people fudge things a little bit, and so many people are fudging things that it's become chaotic. It's hard to manage, and that's why I actually see some people just retreat right into going along directly with the mainstream media narratives, because they're frankly the path of least resistance. The most people believe in them, and there's not much nuance there to need to, you don't have to go through this years-long process of parsing out, well, this person was exaggerating here and that person lied a little bit there, but it was for a good intention. We mind read it for a good or bad intention, however it may be. There's all this out there, and you could say, oh, it's post-truth, and wave it away. Oh, it's post-truth. That's it. We don't need to think. Well, we do need to think, but at the same time, sometimes when I'm reading a story, I go, yeah, we live in a theater world. I talk about that in one of my new videos, Private Parts. Check it out on BitChute and YouTube, where we talk a little bit about how privacy has affected the theatrical nature of human interaction at large. So, onward to the next tweet. So I do want to give a shout out to a fellow content creator. Check out Wicked Felina. She is a political analyst and a historian that talks about all kinds of things, including current events. She has a new video out now about the Virginia stuff with Governor Northam and the Second Amendment questions that have been raised down there in Virginia over the past few days. Of course, she is very entertaining. It's infotainment. Check her out on BitChute and YouTube. Wicked Felina. So here is another good question for you. You know who didn't receive the teachings of social justice in grade school? Older generations. I wonder how that affects their ideology. Could it be that they're more inclined to judge people by their history or character rather than their demographic or immutable privilege? It's an open question. Leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations on this, but I will continue and talk a little bit about it as well. So, our parents, the boomers, they may be called. I'm 35 years old. My parents are boomers. And Generation X, this may apply to you as well. If you're watching, thank you for watching. But we didn't have this level of third wave, fourth wave feminism, the modern religion known as social justice. We have now in the schools, we have more and more intersectionality, what is sometimes referred to as cultural or social Marxism, and in the political context, it's called identity politics or IDPOL. This sort of collectivist, group-minded frame or filter on reality, which separates people into the groups they're a part of and the associations they have, and tends to judge them and try to move them around from there in a postmodern system. So our older generations didn't get this social justice. And this is, by the way, capital letters, S-J, social justice, not the lowercase social justice, which is a generally good, positive thing to bring into our world. What we have when you talk of positive liberty, that's social justice. And I am a proponent of lowercase social justice, but I am also agnostic on the modern religion that is known as social justice. And that is your, cultural Marxism, your intersectionality. Putting people into groups. So older generations, yes, they are of course conscious of immutable characteristics such as ethnicity / race, skin tone, sex, things like your gender, and then they're also cognizant of mutable characteristics such as religion, hobbies, occupation, and anything they can change. Those are mutable. Immutable, we're born with, we're stuck with. Either you have these features in your body or you don't. So I do know that we've never lived in a post-racial or post-sexual world. We always have to just work with what we got. We are all different, and I believe that diversity is a strength. And I like to judge people on their character, their merits and their flaws, what they bring to the table, and not so much their ideology, their associations, or their immutable characteristics, because you can't really judge somebody on something that they never had a chance to change. There's no merit to be had in having one skin tone or one sexuality or another. It's just is what it is. If you're a member of the LGBTQ AI plus community, these characteristics are immutable. You're born with them. Or in some cases, people come to them through nurture over nature, but ultimately it doesn't really matter if it's technically nurture or nature. It does kind of come down to how you feel. And of course, I'm totally cool with how everyone feels. I just tend to get a little bit of friction when we talk about lawmaking. When lawmaking comes into play, you do have to make some considerations and make sure you don't get into multi-legalism or other considerations. So, who didn't receive the teachings of social justice from the social justice disciples and prophets of the modern religion? Who didn't get them in grade school? Older generations. How does that affect their ideology? Well, could it be that they're more inclined to judge people by their history or character rather than their demographic or immutable privilege? I don't remember, privilege is an interesting topic. I don't remember privilege ever being brought up when I was a younger man. Many years ago in high school, and I'm actually a millennial. I was 16 years old in 2000, and I never heard much about privilege. And privilege is an interesting concept because it is very relative. It is very subjective. One person's privilege is another person's, they look at it as a right. We are what we get used to. What we have is confirmation bias, what has been ingrained, sent through our neural pathways, the kind of things that have regulated our dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and cortisol, and helped us, interact with our world and recognize the patterns as they were. There was a different level of engineering back then. We didn't have so many people injecting these topics into school courses. It was a different world. We had certain things like, you want to be a friendly neighbor. We've had Mr. Rogers. We've had Barney the dinosaur saying, sharing is caring. We should be a little bit more sharing, which in some people will say that is a dog whistle to collectivism, Marxism, socialism, communism. I wouldn't go that far. Necessarily. I think it's good to be loving and caring and sharing, as long as you're not overriding your own self-love to get there. You might call that a little bit, narcissistic or self-serving, but I feel like it's important to make sure you love yourself first. Like Jordan Peterson says, clean your home first and then worry about the homes of other people, in a nutshell. I think it's important to have self-actualization before we try to map out and define how other people should run their lives. But that's my opinion. And of course, if you disagree, please do leave me a comment below. But I do think that at a certain point you get to an age where you judge people based on what they've done. You go by meritocracy. You look at the pluses and the minuses. where they could have improved, and how they handle feedback. You know, I have a friend, Ruben Gallo, shout out to Ruben Gallo on Twitter, who had retweeted me and made a lovely thread regarding one of my new tweets called Child World. And Ruben Gallo was talking about how it's not so much about the disagreement between people. Like, we have wedges between all of us. You know, there is a reason why identity politics and social justice are such compelling ideologies. But at the end of the day, he said, it's about how you address those differences and how you come to a consensus or an agreement, or you agree to disagree, however you do it. But if you do that in a very adult way, you stay away from child view and viewing people by base labels and characteristics, like we talk about immutable and mutables. So right now, children are growing up in schools and being told things like, there are certain groups that are the oppressor, and there are certain groups that are the oppressed. And they don't get into the context. Context counts. Remember that, kids? Context counts. They don't get into the context of what's going on. They just say, well, this is the way it is. This is how we'd like you to view reality. This is the filter we'd like you to put. And what we're seeing more and more, and it's turning into teenagers and adults that go around. I wish I were a little bit more sympathetic to this idea, but I don't want to live in an identitarian country. Okay? So I don't like the idea of filtering people by race, sex, religion, or any of these things, mutable or immutable. But you're seeing that more and more. You're seeing a narrative form. Again, we talk about postmodernism and post-truth. We see a narrative form where things are selectively put in front of children, the most impressionable people out there. You know, they're being put in front of grade school kids, and they don't know. They don't know if it's true or false. Just like if you're watching this video, I always say everything I say today might be wrong or right. They don't know. They're going by the trust they have in the adults, the ones that should know. In their mind, they're making a judgment call. Can't mind read, but the children say, they're the adults. I want to rebel, but ultimately I know at the end of the day, I have this intuition that they know it's right. They run the show. They're big, they're smart, and they just trust it and go along with it. And over time, if they have been conditioned to see the world through a certain filter, or a set of filters, some may call it a modern religion of moral code of what is true, what is false, what is universal truth, and how do we map it for others, depending on which modern religion you're talking about. But children are getting all these messages. They're receiving it through their media as well. They're receiving messages that may be positive in intent, but ultimately, again, we have this thing called altruistic otherism. If you're looking at people and looking at them as a stereotype or how they've been described by the media that you intake, that changes everything. And it's just a matter of if the parents, it's really the parents' choice, if the parents wished for their child to grow up with this ideology. So that's why you see with the Christian question, in terms of prayer in schools, and we talk about Muslims. You have can you wear a hijab in school, and all this stuff, this religious freedom that we enjoy in the United States of America. But they ask this question because they say, well, you know, other kids are seeing it, are they influenced? And ultimately, it is the parents' responsibility and discretion to choose what their child intakes. It's a complicated system. That some people, you know, over time, they don't know how much agency does the child have and how much agency does the parent have. But at the end of the day, a lot of our children are being trained to judge people by their immutable characteristics, which I go over in a tweet called Generating Racism. Check it out in a video as well. So I do feel that older people, yes, there are a number of older people that are otherists. They are racists, they are sexists, and that could be a product of culture. Well, it is a product of culture in many ways. Like, we are products of culture. The people that we grow up around, our parents. There are some biological processes that help us to view things in a different way. Some people, I don't want to name certain neurodivergent groups and things like that, but we do have everybody, all 7+ billion of us, do have our own perspective on the greater world, the more objective reality that we're seeing in front of us. But we do have our subjective filters, some rational, some irrational. And I feel like, yes, the social justice question in isolation, this is the conversation we're having, you're not seeing that so much. You're not seeing so many social justice warriors or social justice disciples of that modern religion in the older age groups. It's kind of a young man's and young woman's game. So, but I do want to ask you, the audience, what you think of that question, and I look forward to hearing some feedback. So, onward to our next tweet. And before we go there, I think it's time for today's sponsor, Diet Mug Root Beer. Yes, if the root of your problems is thirst, well, Diet Mug Root Beer can help get you there. It'll lubricate your mind, body, and soul. Diet Mug Root Beer. Get lubricated. All right, so let's find some more tweets. All right, so here is a tough question, or a tough series of questions. This is a named tweet. It's called, Now You're Playing with Power. To the proponents of capital punishment, also known as the death penalty. This is something called revenge administration. Number 1. Should victims of the criminals be allowed to choose the execution format? Should they be allowed to choose the execution format? Number 2. Which format option should be open? And number 3. What is the value of human life? These are some pretty big questions. Once again, open questions. Leave a comment below with your thoughts and observations on these. But let me take a closer look at this tweet here and see if we can find any more framing or information. My friend Jesse says, good questions. Thank you, Jesse. This was back in April 2019. So, I don't support the death penalty. And it's kind of it's a tough question because, you know, some people have a view of morals, a moral view that an eye for an eye is the way to go. If you have somebody that intentionally murders somebody else, then somebody else, the person that intentionally murdered, should be murdered so that you have a sense of equilibrium and a balance. I've heard that framing. For me, I don't think the state should be murdering our own citizens in this manner. Now, I know, again, context counts. We have a lot of different scenarios where we just murder people. We drop 25 to 35 to 40,000 drone bombs on the Middle East and other places in the world. We do precision strikes on people in wartime, like General Soleimani, as we did during World War III, which was only 2 weeks ago. World War III was 2 weeks ago, and we had done those things. And they are morally questionable. It's like, who is benefiting? What is the cost? Is this moral? There are some great questions. And some people say, no, killing is just immoral. And in many ways, they are correct. But it is a complex question. It's not simple. But you're playing with power when you have the state pushing capital punishment and the death penalty. Because so many times, this is the obvious frame for this the obvious point that many people make, that the justice system is imperfect. Some people are not actually guilty of the crimes they've been accused of, and through revenge administration, taking an eye for an eye, they are killed, through lethal injection or otherwise, and they didn't actually do anything wrong. Sometimes prisoners sit on death row or in prison for 35 or 40 years before we find out, well, I didn't actually do it. Forensic evidence came out, and it turns out that they are innocent. But we have to stay away from guilty until proven innocent in this country. We should stick to innocent until proven guilty. And of course, you see a lot of the inverse of that when you see the outrage culture, a modern religion, where people look at their first impression, they see the optics of something, and they pounce immediately. They're triggered to respond. They just jump in there, regardless of how much information they have, what context they're seeing, and so forth. We all make this mistake. I'm not judging. I am very biased. This is a very biased channel, a very biased outlook. I'm not judging. But I am agnostic to the modern religion known as outrage culture for this reason. That people can say, well, people in the jury say, I can spot a liar, I can spot a killer from 100 miles away. And the judge says, yeah, we're getting you out of the jury pool. We're getting you out of the jury pool. I think you're a little bit too in your own head there, buddy. So the first question here about revenge administration is, should victims of the criminals be allowed to choose the execution format? So this kind of puts a question into the hands of the victims. Say, for example, you have a husband and wife. The husband's out walking one day and he gets murdered by somebody, say with a baseball bat. A man gets murdered with a baseball bat. It's very sad. So his wife says, she's prompted with this question, well, I want him to face justice. He killed my husband. It wasn't manslaughter. It was intentional. It was malevolent. And I'd like him to be beaten with a baseball bat as penance for what he has done. Now, is that fair? Is that fair? I mean, it is kind of an eye for an eye. Oh, you blew up my husband with a bomb. Can I blow you up? It really gets into that question of revenge. So many of our systems, actually, our moral systems, the modern religion of social justice, for instance, is about revenge. It's about relitigating the past, going way back and relitigating the past. So it's a good question. There isn't a solid answer for it, but again, it's all subjective. We can come up with our own conclusions. Should victims of the criminals be allowed to choose the execution format? Should it be more entertaining or less entertaining? Right? What do you want to see? And of course, which format options, question 2, which format options should be open? Do we have to do it cleanly? Does it have to be a little shot and the shot happens and then the person goes and that's it? Or is it more beneficial for the greater good if somebody is shot out of the cannon into the Empire State Building, shattering the windows and their corpse falling to the ground? Is that a better example of why someone wouldn't want to commit one of those atrocities in the first place? Is it dissuasive enough? So what format options should be open? If you're willing to kill people for one reason or another, may it be because of a murder or because of something that wasn't necessarily so violent, are there other places? Now again, I'm not an expert on the law. Seek subject matter experts. Talk to a lawyer. Consult a lawyer when we're talking about law. And certainly consult Google and DuckDuckGo. But which format options should be open? It just opens our mind to this question. If we're going to start killing people as a law, what should the parameters be of that box? And ultimately, the third question in Now You're Playing with Power is, what is the value of a human life? This is the question we have to, we have to wrestle with. Like, do we need to eliminate that person from our society? What is their value? What is their actual intrinsic value as a human, living, breathing, conscious human being? I know it costs a lot of money, fiat currency, resources to maintain this person's continued existence on this earth in a cell with cable TV and PlayStation 4. But the question becomes, like, do you value that human life? Do you value human life enough to let this person live out their days in solitude, losing this social element, losing the freedoms, the human rights that we all enjoy? Or in many cases, as George Carlin would say, the temporary privileges of these countries that we all enjoy, until the law changes. So they're good questions. They get you to think. If you have any thoughts, again, comment below, and we'll go from there. Onward and upward to more tweets. So much stuff here. Some of these tweets I had actually talked about in the past and done videos on, but I also skipped a few. It's very selective. Very selective. So we'll do a tweet here called, it's a named tweet, Black Hole Sun. Black Hole Sun. Want to create a persuasion supernova? Collect all data relevant to your thesis. Compress the best information into the smallest space possible with broad language for easier translation. Align points into a singularity, no matter the gravity of the situation. Bam! Black Hole Sun. So this gets into the topic, the art and the science of persuasion. I am not a persuasion expert. You'll have to talk to Gialdini or Scott Adams or Steve Jobs. Well, if you're in heaven or hell, if you're on the other side, talk to Steve Jobs about that, or go back to some of his older videos and listen to what he has to say about topics related to marketing, persuasion, and all sorts of things. A very smart man. But persuasion, there are hundreds of books on the topic. Think and Grow Rich, and of course you have The Power of Positive Thinking. These are all related to this sort of mindset coaching that many persuasion experts tend to fall into. So, want to create a persuasion supernova? Collect all data relevant to your thesis. So, I say more information is better. It's better to have all the cards on the table, the full chessboard in front of you, everything that's relevant to what's going on, so that you can slot things in, slot things out, view what's more relevant, what's less relevant to what you're saying, what might confuse the framing of what you're putting forth, and so on and so forth. You want to make sure you have all the information and then sort of whittle it down from there. It's not good to come in with limited information and a ton of contradictions and things and try to, take people to sophistry school. But you want to at least have logic in what you're describing. So all the data that's relevant. But you do want to go through and compress the best information into the smallest space possible. So persuasion, this is just a very brief primer. Again, seek the subject matter experts, some of which I mentioned in this video. But just as a brief primer, persuasion is a combination of a few different disciplines. But one of them, of course, is this ability to keep it simple, take complex ideas, simplify them, make them easier to understand, more easily translatable, and then frame them correctly according to how you are looking to persuade, which direction you'd like people to go on a given topic. And again, context counts. Sometimes you'll persuade in a certain way and then persuade differently about something else, or even on the same topic, there are different sub-levels of what you're talking about, subtopics as well. But you compress the best information into the smallest space possible with broad language for easier translation. So you might not want to be too specific in the form factor of your persuasion. There are some places where you want to leave, there's certain reasons why, on a subjective and contextual basis, you might want to leave certain things in and leave certain things out. And use language that achieves whatever goal you're looking to achieve, persuades however you'd like, prompts the kind of thought in whatever direction you so desire. So, this is just the very basic, in one tweet, kind of compiling one side of the persuasion process. You align your points into a singularity. You try to get as much in, as wide a frame, but as simplified and as direct as possible. And of course, use other skills within the persuasion skill stack to make the process, again, like diet, mug, root beer, more lubricated. You'll do things like pacing, which is, agreeing with people and finding common ground before you try to bring them in your direction, and other persuasion tools. So you align points to the singularity, and you make it. You try to keep it simple. They call it KISS. Keep it simple, stupid, because people, again, we don't have that much time. We only have so much time watch in the day. We only have so much currency to spend. And sometimes you want to have something that just flows, that brings people in, that makes us all feel included, comfortable. And then you say, well, here's something that I want to talk to you about, and I want to persuade you to. And it doesn't matter the gravity of the situation. I talk about singularity, gravity. There's a little bit of a joke there. And then I say, bam, like a supernova, or persuasion supernova. So I've kind of brought all these terms in to help you visualize. Persuasion is about visualization, creating an image in your head, a filter, a frame for which to view a certain topic or issue, or even just one question. And so I call it black hole sun, gravity of the situation, persuasion, supernova. It's all tied together into this image of, maybe your mind exploding. If you've done too many THC edibles or acid, I do not recommend drug use, everybody. Don't take drug advice from YouTubers. But if you might visualize that explosion, that head explosion, mind explosion meme, and it's one way to frame things and to create this image in someone's head. Now the thing is, we all have our own perception of what's cool, what makes sense, which frames work for us. So somebody might go, well, this doesn't make sense. I find this to be condescending or nonsensical or whatever it might be. But then you turn around and another person might say, this brought me to self-actualization. Thank you very much. You've helped me on my path to enlightenment. I love when that happens. I love when it happens to me, and I love when it happens to other people. Persuasion is about framing things so that they're easily understood by either a specific group or expanding the audience, expanding who you're engaging with. And I try to make things that are engageable by as many people as possible. Now, some things I put out there, of course, have a specific audience, and not everyone's going to get this or this. I've actually found it's very interesting. All of my friends on Twitter, many friends I have, there are certain groups of people that tend to like certain kinds of tweets. So we all have our own tastes about what good persuasion is. It is an art and a science, but in my world, it's not a hard and fast rule. You do want to read up on it, but different people, even in the persuasion world, have different perspectives on what makes something more or less persuasive and which systems work and which ones don't. So definitely good compressing that information into a small space, putting it all on one page. Put it all on one page and compress it down. Get all the best points that all point in the same direction, that singularity, all aligned. And then hopefully people get the point and they learn something from it, whatever your goal might be that day. If you were looking to just trigger somebody or create a certain kind of response, you'd hope for that. But ultimately, a persuasion supernova could be the thing that promotes you, that prompts you to getting another 50,000 followers or getting you ahead in the world, may it be socially or in terms of business. So, something to think about. 2 more tweets for you today. Thank you, Diet Mug Root Beer. Thank you. Okay. I have not done these 2 tweets yet, but I've done similar tweets, and now we're going to go back into the world of modern religion. So, here we go. Modern religions for postmodern prophets. Social justice, global warming, censorship, institutions, celebrity, moral panic, and outrage culture. Everyone needs something to lean on, even the devoutly secular. But ideology and reality run on separate, interweaving tracks. Mind the gap. So this is my framing for belief systems that place faith over reason. They may have components of both, but even the devoutly secular, you don't have to believe in a traditional religion, but you can if you also believe in a modern religion. Well, I'm agnostic on many of them, so my bias is clear, and I'm not making any judgment. But this is how I frame it. And I'd also include here Modern Religion Glossary number 1. You have a pope, a supreme authority, possibly the genesis of that ideology. You have a prophet in the modern religion, a lower authority of the ideology, tasked with proselytizing. You have a disciple of the modern religion, a believer, and often preacher, that this is not only an ideology, but the truth. And a martyr, a non-believer. So in many ways, if you do not believe in the modern religion and you are also cast as a target in determining moral virtue, if your removal from a situation prompts moral virtue, you could be considered a martyr. But we'll go through here and talk a little bit about the concept. I do have a number of videos out there. Moral panic is a modern religion. Social justice is a modern religion. Global warming is a modern religion. Censorship is a modern religion. And a few others that dabble into the same topic, as well as a selection of modern religions that talks about it in an overview sense. But we'll talk more about it here. Because people will ask me, well, it doesn't fit, when you say modern religion, Jeff, it doesn't fit the qualities, the requirements for religion. If I go into the dictionary and I find in the dictionary it says, this is what a religion is, this is what it entails. Well, that's why this is called postmodernism. This is a framing of reality through my personal filter and focusing on, again, selectively certain ideologies and belief systems that I find to be, in the absence of God, we create God. We create axioms. And some of these axioms are covered, and I call them MRs, or modern religions. So, for example, social justice, these are all systems of real-world moralism. They don't necessarily have a deity up in the sky, like Allah or God or Buddha. They have a specific goal in mind. With social justice, you have equality and equity. And people put a lot of faith into this system, this postmodern, collectivist system of social justice, where you cast an oppressor and an oppressed, a bully and a victim. And you say, well, every interaction you have, and then you have intersectionality, where it turns into fractals. You can go through all these different angles on how one person is the oppressor or the oppressed. And so ultimately, people do gain moral virtue and universal truth and order, purpose, and control over their lives through their belief and faith in a modern religion. So, yes, it isn't a religion. It's a modern religion. And with social justice, you have this goal. You say, well, we want people to be equal. We want equal outcomes. And, well, unfortunately, that's not the way that meritocracy and capitalism and physics work in our world. It's just not the way it works. We have to take a ground-up philosophy in many cases. And yeah, we can do little things to make capitalism and meritocracy more fair. Maybe people have been mistreated for largely irrational reasons or biased reasons that we can't map out easily without mind reading and projection. But, we have to address hundreds of millions of people and do it in hundreds of countries. And with a modern religion, we have people out there that will stake their entire reputation. The disciples, they'll stake their entire reputation on their belief system. They will cast people into the groups that they wish to put them into arbitrarily, subjectively, contextually, but ultimately the context becomes everything. They just say, well, you are the groups you're a part of. You are the associations you have. And I find that destructive. So that's why I'm agnostic. I find it immoral, meaning I think there's probably a little more harm than something moral, which would be, we believe people that say they're moral say do no harm. I believe there's harm to be had when you're redirecting your hate in terms of social justice and funneling it towards those you believe have this thing called privilege. And its inverse, known as victim points. People gather victim points based on their immutable characteristics that they can't change. It doesn't seem very meritocratic to me. So I do critique it often. But again, if you are a disciple of the modern religion of social justice, you are welcome here. And I see your good intentions. I'm not going to tell you where they go. That would be a belief. And I am agnostic. But those good intentions go somewhere. And you have to be cognizant that you're not going down that particular road. It's not the only road you can go down, but it is certainly a possible outcome. And it's not equal to the other one. So, that's social justice. You have global warming, fear of climate doom. We have heard enough about that. Check out my video, Modern Religion, Global Warming. Global warming is a modern religion, and I talk more about my feelings on that. Censorship, silencing people will save us all, Jesus! Silence us! Close our voices down, deplatform, deperson. Off with the infidels! Get them out! Jack, Mark Zuckerberg, Get rid of all the people I don't like, whose opinions I don't care about and don't want to hear. That's what I see when I see, well, I'm a little more judgy about the modern religion of censorship. That's what I see. And largely it's not even that. It's not the outrage. It's literally just corporations saying, we don't like the free market. We don't like competition. We don't want to have to deal with this. Hey, Google, can you, get rid of the infidel? Can you culturally engineer, algorithmically engineer them away? And then say it's the advertisers that wanted it. They wanted it. We're doing it for the advertisers. You algorithmically manipulate the results, change the truth. We are in a post-truth world in many ways, as I described earlier in the video. So that's censorship. I don't have a high opinion of it. Institutions, of course, state, media, and academia, mapping out what reality is, what's moral, what's good. And if you trust the government implicitly, you are a disciple of the modern religion of institutions as it pertains to state. But state, media, academia, they all work together. And I talk about that in my tweet and video, Sophistry School. Check it out on BitChute and YouTube, of course. But we talk about how you have to follow the money, follow the influence, follow the power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Follow it around. You might be surprised at what you find. Celebrity is a modern religion. Of course it is, because we have people like Trump and Oprah and Obama, and even my good, well, we're not friends yet, hopefully someday. I am a big Scott Adams fan, and when he has the simultaneous sip, which I love, by the way, Scott, I'm a big fan of yours, it is a ritual. And we have all of our rituals, we have all of our code in these different, some people might say it's a cult. If they have the modern religion of moral panic as their guiding light, they'll say it's a cult. And I say there's a difference between cult and culture. It's a culture. It's a mind country. See, I'm framing it. I'm reframing it for you. But they call it a cult when somebody, especially a cult of personality, PewDiePie, it's a cult of personality. And then Ninja on Twitch and all these different people, they go, oh, you're influencing, you're too persuasive, you're too fun, people are starting to talk like you and act like you. And yeah, you know why? Because we're human beings. We see ourselves in others, they see themselves in us, and it's a constant go-between. It's a communication we have with each other. So, yeah, celebrity is a modern religion. You can put a little bit too much faith in somebody that has credentials. Again, like the institutional world. I put institutions and celebrity next to each other in the tweet here. You have people that are credentialed, that they're experts. They have it under their title on the TV. It says expert in this topic. So you put aside reason. You say, well, I don't know this topic. So they're an expert. Trust the experts. I'm not saying don't trust the experts, but I'm saying you can't trust them implicitly. You can't trust them without any kind of critical thought all the time. Otherwise, well, you get into some trouble. Intellectually, you reach dead ends where you say, well, I'm resting with this guy here, and while I don't have the knowledge to confirm the veracity of what they're saying, they are experts. So, hey, why don't I just put faith before reason? Can't reason it out anymore. Contradictions don't exist, by the way. Something I talk about in my new tweet, Child World. Contradictions don't really exist. It's just missing information. And it's tough sometimes to get that missing information. Sometimes we're just not qualified, in a way, to get it. We can become qualified. So I don't say to people, we talk about censorship as a modern religion. We have the phases of censorship. The first phase is self-censorship. They say, hey, you're not qualified to speak. Don't speak. And so you can choose, because we always have a choice in everything, not to speak. They'll say you're not qualified to speak, so maybe you shouldn't spread mis or disinformation. And that's just a mechanism, a tool of they might frame it as real world moralism, but oftentimes there are sort of malevolent purposes there. So, you can't mind read each person as to why they want to censor you. But sometimes it's just to shut you up, to make sure your voice isn't heard in the dialogue. And I try to get people away from that. I try to make sure that you don't have to be a super expert to be involved in the process, because we all have so much information that we've learned through osmosis, and we all have a say. We're all human beings. We all have to face some of the costs and the consequences of these things that are being done, regardless of the benefits. We all have some stake, some skin in the game. So I don't want to have people get excluded. And of course, with the phases of censorship, just to finish up, there's a video out there, The Phases of Censorship and Other Stories. Check it out on my channel. The second phase, of course, is passive censorship. They tell everybody else, hey, don't listen to this man or woman or whatever your gender may be. They don't listen to them. They're discredited. They might smear you. They might say libelous, slanderous things. They might do all kinds of things to get, not to tell you to stop talking, but to get other people to stop listening to you. And then, of course, the final phase, active censorship, silencing. God, the axiom of the modern religion of censorship is silence. So that means, you don't get to speak. The scientific process ends. Science discontinues. You're no longer trying to find a greater, higher truth that lies between you and somebody else. You just have silence over here and one person spouting on this side everything that they think and believe. So I try to stay away from that. Moral panic and outrage culture, of course. People are scared of new things. New, unexplored, uncertain, unpredictable environments. They are afraid. And they want to bring order to the chaos. This is an altruistic thing to do. So they come in with moral panic and they say, well, rock and roll music seems kind of scary. Heavy metal, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, this seems kind of scary. And then they look at people, cult of personality, moral panic, PewDiePie, or Soph. Check her out on BitChute. I'm not sure if she's on YouTube anymore after YouTube is turning itself into a highly curated publishing platform, not a platform for publishing your content as a creator, but they are a publisher, and they say, well, here, what does Disney want? What does Fox want? What does NBC, CBS, ABC, all these different, ABC's part of Disney. What does Google want? What do the corporations want? People get mad about, this is a little bit tangential, people get mad about meritocracy. And the problems they have are, lobbyists and cronyism and nepotism. And I'm like, yeah. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. When you have all the power to control who gets to say what, who gets to go where, yeah, you're going to give it to those that you have a preference for. They might be your friends, your family. Maybe there's a lot of money involved. Money, follow the money when it comes to these institutions. So, moral panic, drugs. We should end the drug war. End the drug war, decriminalize, stop making addicts into criminals. They are sick. They are not, if they've committed a violent crime, sure, view them with that lens. But again, they are sick people. They are hurting. They don't need to be thrown into prison. They need to go into rehab, But we have moral panic. Every time something new happens, people are afraid of the unknown. And we're all part of this. I am a victim too. I've been outraged before. I have looked at things and said, no. And then years later, I come back to it and I go, well, I'm used to it now. What was I so scared of in the first place? So it can happen. I like to keep an optimistic frame, an optimistic view versus pessimism on these things and try to let them play out a little bit before I, get outraged. Because folks, outrage culture is a modern religion and it's outrage all the way down. I'm outraged over your outrage, you're outraged over my being outraged over your outrage, and I'm outraged, you're outraged. It's just, the idea is to keep a cool head and be agnostic or even atheistic to this modern religion and just point out, I'm not trying to police behavior here, but some people literally just are going from outrage to outrage to outrage to outrage to outrage. It's like it is the dopamine drip of their day on social media and elsewhere. No judgment here, but I do try to say, yeah, maybe take a step back before allowing yourself to give in to every trigger, because it is a minefield out there, folks. It truly is. Everyone needs something to lean on, even the devoutly secular. But ideology and reality run on separate, interweaving tracks. Mind the gap. So you have ideology over here, you have a belief system, may it be a religion or a modern religion, and then you have reality. You have what's really happening in the outside, observable universe. You have everything that the actual movements of things happening, and then you have the ideal over here. You have a moral core, a code, if you will, ethics, and a system of moral virtue and truth, how to get there, how to reward, how to bring order and purpose and control people so that they're culturally engineered to do the right thing in reality. But again, reality is chaotic. Reality has so many factors that are seen and unseen. And sometimes there is a bit of interweaving. You have ideologies that fit well over reality and make certain things that happen make more sense. They can make things make more sense. That's why we do persuasion. That's why we do postmodernism and framing, to help things make more sense. Sometimes there's a little bit of hyperbole mixed in, or post-truth, or maybe a little exaggeration again, hyperbole. There might be something that's slightly fudged a little bit and it needs a little bit more nuance to be whole, but ultimately that's what it's kind of about, having a frame that makes sense, that enough people, more people can understand and get used to viewing values this way, putting values on things and viewing them in a productive manner. It's about having a productive, constructive frame and not one that's just destructive and self-defeating. But they run on separate, interweaving tracks, and we should mind the gap between them. Make sure we understand how much of this is our confirmation bias and maybe even cognitive dissonance, and how much is actually happening. So that's why I talk about, with persuasion, you can get a more, sometimes when you look at large-scale human interactions, you can get a more predictive frame on things over time, a more predictive filter, so you kind of know what to expect, and you can use casual fatalism and determine what's movable, what's immovable, what's belief, what's real, what are facts, what is fiction, so on and so forth. So I'd like to frame things this way. Not to say, you should never tell someone that their religion or modern religion doesn't exist or isn't real, or if it's just a belief system, because that would be rude. And you don't want to be rude to people. So the glossary, you have your popes, your super large voices that kind of guide the direction and maybe even could be the genesis of a modern religion, such as global warming. The people that put out those models and those figures and estimates that may or not be true over 30 or 40 years. They may be just, highly flawed, maybe even manipulated, but they're the ones that are the progenitor of that thought, of that modern religion. May it be, I don't call global cooling a modern religion, I just call global warming one. But they're all within that same purview of climate change and climate as a sort of moral system. We have to protect the planet at all costs. Put human considerations, put economics aside, faith over reason, and say, we have to do all these things. It's Kairos effect. We have to take action now. It's a religious fervor. Yes, you might go to Wikipedia and not find modern religion, but There are truths to this. We have apostates. We have all these different features. I talked with my friend Kyle on Twitter about this a few weeks ago about modern religion, and the fact is you do have rituals and you do have your popes, prophets, disciples, and martyrs. There's so many parallels to traditional religion that I find modern religion to be a productive frame. A prophet, of course, is a lower authority, not the supreme authority of a pope, but a lower authority of the ideology tasked with proselytizing. So if you see a blue check on Twitter talking about one of these modern religions, you know they're a prophet because they have a little bit more credential. They can give their blessings and take them from everybody else. A disciple, which is a believer and often a preacher, that this is not only an ideology but the truth. So people that, they don't see it as a belief system or ideas, they see it as this is how it is. Now, if I go to a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu and I say, well, you believe in God. I don't believe in God. You believe in God, and you go up to them and you ask them questions, and you get the sense that they do truly, ultimately believe in the divine. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And you might not believe. You might want to believe, but you may or may not believe. Maybe you do believe, whatever it might be. But they see it as the truth. They see it as the truth. And it's not just ideology. It's not just I go to church, I go to mosque, I might be Jewish, I go to temple. It's not just that. It's more than that. It's a full-on life belief, a lifelong belief. It's very important, very intrinsic to their core identity, their connection with God. So I totally respect that. And what I'm seeing is then that when you don't have God, when you're devoutly secular, like I am, you see people that still have that same level of devotion, that same level of passion, which is a buzzword, but the passion behind that ideology or belief in a way that you can't dissuade them of it. And to try to dissuade them of it could be, in many ways, quite rude. Would you go up to your grandmother or your grandfather who wears prayer beads and has the rosary, does the rosary every day, and you say, "Hey, Grandpa, God doesn't exist"? That would be a militant atheist thing to do. I remember those days. Back when I was in my 20s, I was a little bit more making fun of people for being religious. But the older you get, I gotta be honest with you folks, the older you get, the more you're going to respect religion. Count on it. Because it does offer a greater thing to aspire to, something greater than ourselves. A higher, supreme, divine being and force that we can be inspired by to do greater things with ourselves. We are not the end-all, be-all, and we don't have to look only inward. We can look outward and upward and find our purpose, our meaning, in our own faith. But I like to make sure that people understand and remember, they know it deep down. I don't want to project or mind read, but I think people know it deep down. These are belief systems. They are not the truth. But it helps when you're persuading to take, an absolute position. Or as Scott Adams would say, an absurd absolute in some cases. And of course, martyrs, non-believers. If you are censored off of social media, please send me your stories in the comments section below. You would be a martyr of the modern religion of censorship, and I thank you in advance, and I hope things work out for you because we are seeing more and more of it in 2020 than ever before. I don't like to, again, our frame on reality, as we talked about earlier in the video, is very relative, very subjective. We only have the things we see and perceive, and some of them are algorithmically manipulated. So we never truly know just how organic our impression of reality is sometimes. There's a lot of searching, a lot of information to see the greater mosaic, the greater game board, whatever, however you want to frame it. And so I say we should always be on the search for truth and never truly settling down. You can rest or go on vacation in an echo chamber, but I recommend not living in an echo chamber. You want to live in a place of open dialogue. So that's it for today's tweet video. Thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate that. If you enjoyed the video, please do like and subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, meritocracy rules, hit that downvote button. It really helps me with the algorithm. And of course, I am on Twitter, Real Jeff Tidwell. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Telegram, Instagram, and Parler. If you're not watching this video on YouTube, you're watching it on BitChute. Thank you very much, of course. And if you have any thoughts or observations, hey, leave me a comment below. With those accolades, criticisms, trolls, I take it all. I love hearing from you guys, and I love talking to you. And as I always say, everything I said today might be wrong. Or everything I said today might be right. Perhaps the truth lies between. Some of what I said was wrong, and some of what I said was right. I think that makes the most sense. So once again, thank you for tuning in. I hope you all have a wonderful night, and I will see you next time.